So you love Theo of Golden and want that feeling, or perhaps you thought it was too saccharine but wanted to love it, and you love The Correspondent, but maybe you wanted a more traditional narrative. Whistler is your next read. Hi, I'm Amanda, and this is Spineless Books, spoiler-free reviews for readers and listeners like me. Please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. It really helps the channel. And in exchange, every week you get a new spoiler-free review of all kinds of genres. So if that sounds like your thing, come join me. Prior to listening to Whistler, I have only ever listened to one Ann Patchett novel, and that's Tom Lake, which was narrated by Meryl Streep. Now, Meryl Streep, Ann Patchett, how can you go wrong? But I still found that the beginning of that story was slow and meandering, and it took a little while for me to feel like I was really into it. In the end, I loved it. But Whistler was a completely different story. I really loved Whistler from the very beginning, and Ann Patchett just had me wrapped around her finger right away. You can look at this book a number of ways. You can look at it as a father-daughter story, though it's not exactly that. You can look at it as a platonic love story, or you can look at it as romantic, although there is nothing sexual about this story. The two people in this book, Daphne and Eddie, are reconnecting after a long time, and it's just amazing to witness. The book is really about the impact that people have on our lives, and sometimes it's an impact that we don't realize and they don't realize. And in this case, both Daphne and Eddie have impacted each other and get a chance to figure that out and process it. The book is downright brilliant, and I will just come out right away and say it's 5 stars for me. Daphne is in her 50s, and early on in the book, by pure happenstance, she reconnects with Eddie, her stepfather. Now, you think stepfather, of course, why would she need to reconnect with him? But they haven't seen each other in over 40 years because Eddie is no longer technically her stepfather. He's now in his 70s, and he just manages to kind of pick her out in a public space, and that's sort of all that happens. Daphne doesn't recognize Eddie right away, but once she knows who he is, the fireworks start. And again, not romantic fireworks, but these are two people who have had a very strong impact on each other. There is a moment in Daphne's life in which Eddie was pivotal, and it turns out that Daphne was pivotal for Eddie too, and she quickly learns that, even though she's never really thought about him as an adult. This is one of those stories where it's really about the characters, and in fact, not a whole lot happens, and trust me, that's okay. But Eddie and Daphne get a chance to recount and talk about a very pivotal moment that they experienced together that they never had a chance to process. And now is that time, even though it's almost 40 years later, it's still a worthwhile thing for them to talk through. They were both forever changed by this moment, and I'm not sure either one really realizes how much they were changed by this moment until they start to get to talk about it with each other. And that really is an incredible thing to witness in this book. I found myself really drawn to Daphne and Eddie as well, and listening to them go back and go through this emotionally complex scene was really, really sort of awakening. I don't know how to explain it, but it's something that you could kind of feel the tension and the importance for them as it happened, and I felt like I had a ringside seat and I needed to know everything. The secondary characters in this book were amazing too. Daphne's husband and her sister, who Eddie also knows, and then a couple that Eddie's friends with that become pretty important in the story, although they're not necessarily main characters. Everybody was likable and fulfilled a really important role in the story, and not a word was out of place in this book. And I found, honestly, at the end of the story, like I needed to grieve the characters. I'm not trying to say that nobody makes it to the end of the story by any means, but I just felt so immersed in their world and so in love with all of them that the idea that the story had to end and I had to kind of go on with my life outside of the whole Whistler family was really devastating. And I feel like I just want to find Eddie and hug him and find Daphne and hug her. And it was just so beautiful that I was sad that it had ended. There's a thematic elegance to a story that is so simple and really lacking action. And Ann Patchett has this magical way of making the story feel suspenseful and like you're on the edge of your seat, even though it's not scary. It's just gripping and driving and pulling you in every moment of every conversation. I think Ann Patchett is just brilliant. Her format in this book is interstitial, which means that she is writing one long narrative with little bits that break away from that and tell a separate story. So essentially in this book, they are the flashbacks that speak about the pivotal event that Daphne and Eddie have experienced. But it's so seamless, and she just flows in and out of it in a way that is amazing. Daphne is mostly telling this story to people in the story, so when they have to kind of take a natural break, like it's time for dinner or something like that, that's when they leave that sort of flashback scene. And it's just so seamless and amazing and woven so perfectly. And the only thing I had that I could say about it was that it just left me wanting more every single time. But the present day narrative was also really fascinating. So I wasn't missing anything when I went back and forth. I just found both really exciting. And they connect, so it's not just like they're randomly flashing back and forth either. Patchett has a way of making you feel like you're just sitting there in the room with the characters. Her dialogue is so well done and so naturally crafted. I felt as though I was in the living room with Daphne and Eddie most of the book, or I was in whatever room their scenes were taking place in. And it just, something about it is so real and so accurate that you believe it. You believe every second of it. Patchett uses that amazing dialogue and memory and character to make you feel like the stillness in this story is urgent. And it just drives the narrative so aggressively that you can't put this down. In fact, I listened to the entire second half of this book in a single sitting, minus a couple of breaks for food and bathroom, because I just had to know. And I couldn't let go of that world. Nothing else existed for me. And I was 100% engrossed. I mean, isn't that what you want from a book? I seem to have this unwarranted concern that when an author narrates their own story, I should worry. And more often than not, I find that's not the case at all. So I'm not really sure where this preconceived notion comes from for me. But in this case, Patchett is narrating her own book. Now, I've seen her interviewed a number of times, and she's very calm and soft-spoken and just sort of quiet. So I think maybe that's where my worry came from in this case. Yet it was perfect. She is Daphne. In fact, she talked in an interview that I watched about the fact that she wrote this story based on a relationship she had with a friend who she lost. Now, Daphne is not Ann Patchett and Eddie is not her friend, but I think the fact that she related to this kind of relationship allowed her even more adeptly to narrate and capture all of the feelings that Daphne was going through. It's rare to finish a book and just know this is going to be one of your best reads of the year. I mean, from the very beginning, I was sure this was a solid book, but it just grew in importance to me as time went on. And I totally understand why people say, I wish I could go back and reread this again for the first time. But unfortunately, once you've read it, you've read it. I've recommended it to a few people already who've all felt the same, and that's a really good feeling when something hits for you and also hits for everyone you tell. Again, this was 5 stars, and this book will 100% be in my top 10 for the year, if not in the top 5, top 3, maybe top 1. Who knows? But it's definitely on that list, and nothing's going to bump it out, and I can tell you that for sure. I have to say, I think if you love Theo of Golden, you'll love this story. If you didn't love Theo of Golden because it felt too sweet to you, you'll love this story. If you love The Correspondent and how that made you feel, but you don't want to read something written in letters again, you'll love this story. I think this is a feel-good book about human connection that not enough people have read yet as far as I'm concerned, because this book is so brilliantly written. It's literary fiction, but it's so much more than that. So again, Theo of Golden readers and Correspondent readers, you should get your hands on this as soon as possible. And let me know what you think. But remember, you might love what I hate and hate what I love. So make your own opinion. But thanks for listening to mine. I hope you like and subscribe, and I hope I see you next time.